Assalamu alaikum everyone. How are you all my students? I hope you're fine. Okay, your answer is yes, that's wonderful. I hope that you have started working on phonetics and phonology, and I'm sure that you are working like a young scientist. I request you that you have to you have to think about the concepts which are ruling phonetics and phonology. I hope that you can recall my words when I was talking to you in the first session, that yes, exactly, apparently it seems little technical branch of linguistics, both the branches, of course, phonetics and phonology. But I believe in your potential, and I think that all you people are talented wherever you are. One more thing which I want to add in today's session before we talk about what we are going to discuss in session number 2. First, the previous one, and second, the new one. The previous one is that I requested to please make a folder. Yes, please make a folder. That's very important, that you have to make a folder. Without making a folder, it is not possible for you to remember what assignment, what task, what activity, on what day, on what session I am doing or I have done. It's very important. Yes, exactly. It is very important because all the time that folder keeps you updated. And I want you to be updated all the time, not only this particular course that is known as Phonetics and Phonology, but about every course I'm saying to you. Now, the second thing is that the equipment, the gadgets you people have, that is the Android technology based, your cell phone, mobile phone. Yes, exactly. Make the best use of this. It is very important for the students because this is a different branch of linguistics or different branches of linguistics. So far as the practice is concerned, I want you to practice a lot, and I'm sure by the end of this course you shall be a different speaker. This is my belief about you people. I know that you shall turn into wonderful speakers, knowing English pronunciation, refined English pronunciation. At the same time, you will have conceptual understanding of phonetics and phonology. Well, my dear students, this is session number 2 and we are in the first week. One thing I want to say before we start at today's session, and that is that each and every session is connected with the next session. As each and every slide is connected with the next slide, same is the case with each and every session from one to the last. So please bear in mind that you do not miss any session, okay? Our today's topics are 4 primarily. We should be talking about, first of all, phonetics and phonology interface. Then we should try to understand phonetics and other disciplines of learning. For example, is there any coordination or cooperation among different disciplines of learning? So far as phonetics is concerned, do they cooperate? Do they assist each other? Or is there any sort of role of other disciplines to understand phonetics? Then we should be talking about speech organs. We should try to understand, because we use this term somewhere in the first session. And lastly, we should try to understand the branches of phonetics, but not in detail. We shall be having detailed analysis of each and every branch of phonetics in the coming session. Well, the first thing we have to try to understand is the phonetics-phonology interface. By this time I understand that phonetics is what we call, it is a scientific study of the production, transmission and reception of speech sounds. And I hope this is what you understand. So that means there is a coordination in between you and me, that we understand each other. Today we have to talk about phonetics-phonology interface. We tried to understand in the previous session what is phonetics. We shall definitely try to understand more and more and we also try to understand phonology. I told you that we cannot separate English language when we talk about phonetics. Somehow we have to make a reference to English language. But remember, very simple question is, what is phonetics? And the answer is, it is a scientific study of the production, transmission and reception of speech sounds, or the knowledge of phonetics, or the branch of phonetics. Since this is one of the branches of linguistics, it studies the production, transmission and this reception of speech sounds. But at the same time, we try to understand the term phonology. Definitely when I talk about phonology, then I have to refer to any particular language. And this time I have got English with me, and definitely I can say that phonology of English. So there is interface of phonetics and phonology. May I read the first statement for you people, that phonetics looks at the physical production of sounds, focusing on which vocal organs are interacting with each other and how close these vocal organs are in relation to one another. Now, vocal organs, number one is the production of sounds, but the physical production of sounds through what? The vocal organs. It's very important to understand, as I told you during the last session, that inside human body there are certain systems, but within a system, for example, respiration or respiratory system, but within respiratory system there are certain subsystems. And when we talk about vocal organs, that means something which is related to the production of certain sounds. But at the same time, when we talk about phonetics and phonology interface, that means the first thing we have to understand is that the vocal organs and then their relation to one another. That means, in accordance with this statement, the vocal organs sometimes come close to each other or one another. Sometimes they are absolutely close, sometimes not close. So this is what we have to understand during today's session. The second thing which is very important to understand is that phonetics also looks at the concept of voicing occurring at the pair of muscles found in your voice box. Two new things now we are countering. The first one is voicing, the second one is voice box. I repeat, phonetics also looks at the concept of voicing occurring at the pair of muscles found in your voice box, also known as the Adam's apple. The Adam's apple. That's the third new thing we try to understand. Now, phonetics primarily talks about, it looks at what? Voicing. If I put a question, this question, for example, the question is, what is voicing? And that person from whom I'm expecting the answer is not having English as major. Maybe he or she is studying chemistry or biology or physics or maths or maybe something like that. His or her answer could be different from you, because you are now going to understand what is voicing. As I told you during my first session, I shall try to be very simple. I shall try my level best to be analyzing and giving details of each and every terminology, which is very important. Voicing, but at the same time the statement says occurring at the pair of muscles found in your voice box, also known as the Adam's apple. The number one thing is we have to understand what is voicing. Definitely the coming slide will enable us to understand in a different way, but for this time I want you to understand voicing. Remember, muscles have been mentioned here. Pair of muscles. Adam's apple. My dear, very honorable students, remember this is the part of larynx. voice box. Nature has given us this wonderful gadget inside us. A common man may not be knowing that what is voice box, or maybe some of the people know what is voice box, but they do not know what is the working of voice box. But as a student of phonetics and phonology, I hope that you shall be in a better position to answer. Voicing. Remember larynx, pair of muscles. Now look at your neck in front of the mirror. There is a swollen part on your neck beneath the chin. That is called Adam's apple. That is called Adam's apple. If you put your thumb on Adam's apple and you produce a sound, if there is a vibration at that place, that means this sound is voiced. Voicing is there. But if there is no vibration at that spot, you can call it voiceless sound. So that's why the statement says that phonetics also looks at the concept of voicing occurring at the pair of muscles found in your voice box, also known as the Adam's apple. Okay? As I told you, if the vocal folds are vibrating, this creates voicing, and any sound made in this way are called voice sounds. For example, Z. In the previous slide when I was talking to you, I said that certain sounds we're all the time producing, but remember the simple way out is that you have to put your thumb on Adam's apple and produce the sound. If there is some sort of vibration, that is called voiced sound. But if there is no vibration at all, remember that sound is known as voiceless. For example, the second statement says, if the vocal folds are not vibrating, this does not lead to voicing and creates a voiceless sound. For example, S. S. I want you to put your thumb on your Adam's apple, and say after me, S. S. So there is no vibration at all. Okay? Now you can observe this yourself by placing two fingers or thumb upon your voice box and saying Z and S. This time say Z, Z. You can feel vibration. So when there is vibration, we are saying that is called voicing or voiced sound. But when we say S, there is no vibration at all. You can repeat again and again. So you should feel vibration against your finger or thumb when you're saying Z or Z, but no vibration when you're saying S. I repeat, Z, there is vibration. This is called voicing. But when I say S, there is no vibration. That means it is voiceless sound. Are you getting my point? But you must remember that phonology, however, is associated more with the abstract properties of sounds. I repeat, phonology, however, is associated more with the abstract properties of sound, as it is about how these categories are stored in the mind. So phonology is associated with the abstract properties of sounds. You must remember this line, but remember we shall be analyzing this statement in detail when we shall pick up phonology. But for the time being, it is very important, the abstract properties of sounds. The abstraction. Do you remember some of the course outline units? stress, intonation, dropping of certain sounds, elision, assimilation, bringing two sounds together. All these things we have to talk about. But phonetics also describes certain properties as being gradient, such as voicing, where we can compare the length of voicing between two sounds. But that's not the case with phonetics. Phonetics is something else, because it talks about certain properties. For example, if I produce a sound f and then th, f and th. Now I can understand that when I produce the sound f, my upper teeth are touching the lower lip. And then I can produce the sound f. I am pushing the air outside, and doing that, my upper teeth are touching the lower lip. But when I produce the sound th, my tip of the tongue is touching the back of front teeth. So certain properties, the sound produced while touching the tip of the tongue with the inside of front upper teeth, that produces th sound. So certain properties, we shall discuss it in detail, right? But remember, so far as the interfaces with phonology and phonetics are concerned, or the interface of phonetics and phonology is concerned, remember these interfaces are on three ways. Three ways. There are three ways to understand what are the interfaces in between phonetics and phonology. The very first one is that phonetics defines distinctive features. Now features mean that we include each and every sound. It tells us about each and every sound we produce. It shall tell us in the coming days that is there any class of these sounds? Can we classify these sounds? The answer is yes. So that's why there is distinction. So it defines distinctive features. And then phonetics explains many phonological patterns. That is the point you must remember. There are certain phonological patterns which in fact are explained by phonetics. In other words, we can say that we have got the foundation in the form of phonetics, and on that foundation we erect the building of phonology. That's why the above two interfaces constitute what has come to be called the substantive grounding of phonology. Phonology cannot work without the proper knowledge or the proper understanding of phonetics, because phonetics talks about the distinctive features, and there are certain phonological patterns. For example, if you are going to talk about English language, okay, what would be your first thing to say about English? That English language is based on certain symbols, maybe spoken or maybe written, isn't it? If you talk about, for example, the written symbols, definitely you are referring to morphology, and afterwards you are referring to syntax. Am I right? But remember, even the written, whatever the written symbol is, it has got some sort of sound. It has got some sort of sound. And you must be knowing the concepts behind phonetics. And without understanding the concepts behind phonetics, it is not easy, or rather, it is not possible to understand the patterns of phonology. So that's why the above two, in fact, they constitute, because we have to understand phonology on the basis of phonetics. Are you getting my point? Good. But my request to you people is that never forget what? That phonetics is often defined with respect to phonology. Both disciplines are concerned with the sound medium of language. It is not useful to draw a hard and fast line between them. This is what I was explaining in the previous slide, that we don't have to draw a hard and fast line between them. Why? Because it's very important to understand phonetics. Without understanding phonetics, it is not possible to understand phonology. Because first of all, we have to understand the entire concept of the production, transmission and reception of speech sounds. For that very reason, we have to go after certain branches of phonetics. And once we understand what phonetics tells us, yes, then we will be capable of understanding phonology of any particular language. And for instance, we have English with us. If you want to understand the phonological rules of English, remember we must try to understand first of all what is phonetics and what it talks about. So that's why I'm saying that both are defined with respect to phonology, especially phonetics is often defined with respect to phonology. This is very important to understand. You can see what is the name of your course, Phonetics and Phonology. It is not separate, that phonetics and the other course is phonology. They are clubbed. When they are clubbed, that means that we have to understand both. Yes. So we cannot separate phonetics and phonology. Why? Because first of all, we have to understand the concepts behind phonetics. And then, based on those concepts, we need to understand phonology. And the second thing which is in this slide is the center of the gravity or center of gravity of the two fields is however different. Center of gravity, this is what I have been telling you, that when somebody puts a question about phonetics, so please do not talk about any specific language. Don't mention Urdu or English or any other language, right? But talk about generally, and that is what that I'm talking about, the production, transmission and reception of speech sounds. It further says that in general, phonology is concerned with the patterning of sounds in a language and in a language in general, and is thus comparable to areas of linguistics such as syntax and morphology, which I talked about, which deal with structural elements of language at other levels. This is what I was trying to explain, that when we try to understand, for example, the written symbols, and symbols definitely they are primarily morphemes, we are talking about morphology. And those morphemes, when they are joined together, they are used in words, and words in sentences, and sentences into longer paragraphs, something like that. We are talking about syntax, in fact. So the basic is generally, the basic of all this is what we call phonology. Yes, exactly, phonology. Let's try to understand in a different way. For example, phonetics is more centered on the way those structural elements are realized in the world through movements of the speech organs which create the acoustic signal. So phonetics is primarily concerned with the acoustic signals. Do you remember when I said that there is a role of different disciplines when we try to understand phonetics? It is very much there. You can understand, for example, phonetics therefore has important links not only to linguistics but to natural sciences such as physics and anatomy. When we talk about the acoustic signals, the sounds, that means we are talking in terms of physics. And when we say that what are the organs of speech which are working, for example, I am talking to you and this time my jaws are moving. Inside there is a complete world that is helping me to produce certain sounds. So these disciplines are all the time working together. This is what I was trying to establish right before this talk, that remember the other disciplines are also working with us. It is not simple story of production of speech sounds, or the transmission of speech sounds, or the reception of speech sounds. Certain other factors are also involved. So it is very important for all of us to understand that we link phonetics to other disciplines as well for understanding. I'm not saying that we have to be expert in anatomy and we got to be experts in physiology and physics, but at least for the time being, what we can understand and figure out is that yes, exactly, when we are talking about phonetics, of course, the other branches or other disciplines of learning, they are also working. There are, for example, physics. Physics is very much apparent when we talk about phonetics. We are producing sounds, exactly, that is physics, isn't it? But how we are producing sound, that is anatomy or physiology. So this is what we have to learn, and this is what we have to understand. Well, time and again, I have mentioned speech organs. For example, we also talked about voice box. We also talked about Adam's apple. We also talked about vocal tract. The slide in front of you is self-explanatory. But remember, this is the first technical thing you are coming across. This is the first diagram which I expect from you people that you have to master. Throughout this course, remember, this diagram will help you. Without understanding this diagram, remember, the things will be little difficult for you to understand. So that's why my suggestion to you is that we have to focus very, very carefully on this slide. Now this slide has got two parts. One is the diagram itself, and then there are certain names and terms written. On the right side you can see, yes, and there are 9 different names of terms, whatever you call them, they are written there. And they are positioned on the diagram. My dear students, it's very important to understand now. We've been talking about what? Phonetics. And we try to understand that this is the branch of linguistics that studies the production, transmission, and reception of speech sounds. Where speech is produced? Lungs? No. Then where? Windpipe? No. Then where? Larynx? No. Mouth. But remember, before reaching mouth or lips, whatever I have mentioned, for instance, lungs, larynx, or maybe windpipe and the other speech organ, every speech organ is playing its role. I hope that you have read Shakespeare's very famous line that this world is a stage and we are actors. We come and play our roles on the stage. So these are the players, in fact, in the production of speech sounds. Now, first of all, try to understand the 9 names which are written there. Bilabial, labiodental, dental. When I say dental, of course you have to club, that is interdental as well. Alveolar, alveolar, post alveolar. Then 2 subclasses, retroflex and plato-alveolar. Then platal, velar, uvular, and pharyngeal. Bilabial, labiodental, dental and interdental, alveolar, post-alveolar, with a Post-alveolar, we have got retroflex, and plato-alveolar, then platal, velar, uvular, apharyngeal. What do you mean by these all names? We don't know. But it's very important to understand the diagram now. We start from the bottom, glottis and vocal cords. Do you remember Adam's apple? To understand voicing? Do you remember? Yes, exactly. We try to understand Adam's apple because we wanted to understand what is voicing. And I try to explain that what is voicing any sound. You put a finger, you put your thumb on Adam's apple, you start producing the sound. If there is some sort of vibration, remember that sound is voiced sound. But if there is no vibration at all, call it a voiceless sound. So the story starts from this place. Always remember, then lungs are there. Beneath them, lungs. And beneath lungs, we have got a part, muscular part, that is diaphragm, close to abdomen. That part pushes, in fact, the lungs. And then lungs push the air upward through the windpipe and send through larynx and then to the mouth. But before mouth, remember, there are certain other places where this airstream is filtered or processed. Now, we have to start now. You understand glottis and vocal cords, but I want you to just focus on your lips. That is number one. You have got upper lip and lower lip. All right. Then you can see on upper lip alveolar ridge. Now, alveolar ridge, what is that? In your own language, you people call it talu. One part of your talu, what we call alveolar ridge, is hard. The other one is soft. Okay? The hard part is known as hard palate. You can see that. And the soft part is known as soft palate, and it is also known as velum. And then two, we have got teeth. Can you see number two, teeth? And then number 3, 4, 5. Can you see that? We have got tongue. Yes, tongue. Tongue. You can see that there are 4 parts, or maybe sometimes 5 parts, but 4 parts. You can see the tip of tongue. The blade of tongue is the entire of from tip to back. And then you can see the front and the center and the back of tongue. So 4 parts are very important. May I say that the tip of tongue, the front of tongue, the center of tongue, and the back of tongue. Are you getting my point? That's pretty good. Now, for understanding's sake, if I say bilabial, now you can see 2 lips. Can you see that? Upper lip and lower lip, can you see? So, 1 number has been given. You have to touch both the lips to produce the sound B, B, or P. When I say B or P or M, for example, I can call them bilabial sounds. Now you are in a better position to understand what I am trying to make you understand. That bilabial means that there are certain sounds which are called bilabial sounds, and how they are produced with the help of 2 lips, upper and lower lip. So like that, all the speech organs are working to produce certain sounds. For example, the second is labiodental. I simply want you to understand for the time being. If I say labiodental, that means lips or lip and teeth. Now, if you produce the sound th, no. It is yes. No. Is it absolutely no? labiodental. That means labio, lip and teeth. Now try to produce the sound f. F. You can feel that the upper teeth are touching the lower lip. That makes labiodental. When I say th, that is not labiodental, that is a dental sound. That the tip of the tongue is touching the upper teeth, inside of the upper teeth. But in labiodental, if somebody asks you what are the labiodental sounds, you can say, okay, f and v. Why? Because the upper teeth are touching the lower lip. So like that, all the speech organs work together. Okay? So that I want you to remember this diagram. This is a very important diagram. And throughout this semester, I'll try to refer to this diagram time and again. Of course, you will come across many other diagrams, but this is the basic one you must remember. And for this particular diagram, we have got the courtesy, which is to be extended to Encyclopedia Britannica. Dear students, my dear students, now the time has come to understand phonetics in a different way. Now let's start like this, that phonetics is the scientific study of the production, transmission and reception of speech sound. Refer to the previous slide when we try to understand the speech organs. I think you are in a better position now to understand, yes, exactly, while producing, while transmitting and receiving, certain speech organs are working. Let's speak of, for example, the last part, that is the reception. That means ears are involved. Ears do not produce the sounds, but receive the sounds. And yes, exactly, since our ears are trained, remember, these are the ears, always remember they should be trained. For instance, you might have seen that there are certain people who claim that, okay, I cannot understand the English of native speaker whose first language is English. For example, if you come across a British or American person and you can say after listening to him that he or she is speaking a very difficult English. In fact, he or she is not speaking difficult English. The answer is that our ears are not trained. Since we don't live among them and we don't have that sort of environment where we are all the time engaged in English language speaking. That's why time again I told you during the first session and exactly in the beginning of this session, I made a request that the most important thing is that you have to get yourself engaged in speaking English. Now, speaking English doesn't mean that we have to go to some particular place, some particular academy, some particular institution, something like that. No, you don't have to go to any particular academy or particular institution to learn how to speak English. Your friends, your colleagues, your peers are the best laboratory. Whosoever is studying with you, maybe he or she is enrolled in BS or MA English program. No. If you come across any other person, any other student who is doing his or her BS or MA or MS is something like in another discipline, you can talk to him or her in English. The most important thing which we need is the practice. That's why I was saying that since our ears are not trained, we start blaming that someone is speaking difficult language. No, somebody is not speaking difficult language. Why? Because our ears are not trained. Since production, transmission and reception, and then production and transmission, the primary job is to understand how the sounds are produced and transmitted. Are you getting the point? How the speech sounds are produced and transmitted. And then I would like to say that phonetics is the related branch of linguistics concerned with the actual properties of speech sounds and not speech sounds, and how they're produced and perceived. Now, in other words, in fact, we are analyzing what is phonetics. It is the branch, of course, related branch of linguistics, rather one of the branches of linguistics concerned with the actual properties of speech sounds and non-speech sounds and how they are produced and perceived. This last part is very important, my dear students. How they are produced and perceived, how they are produced and perceived, because production and reception, in the coming days, when we shall be picking up phonology, and when we will be talking about English pronunciation, and we will be talking about suprasegmental phonology, these things will help you. That's why I am emphasizing in the beginning. Is it clear? Okay. Having said this, I would definitely further my argument so that we may be able to understand phonetics comprehensively. I would like to start with this, that phonetics is a related branch of linguistics concerned with the actual properties of speech sounds and non-speech sounds and how they are produced and perceived. This is what I ended the last slide. I said that phonetics is the related branch of linguistics concerned with the actual properties of speech sounds and non-speech sound and how they are produced and perceived. And I focused on how they are produced and perceived. Why? Because the next line says, phonetics studies the defining characteristics of all human vocal noise and concentrates its attention on those sounds which occur in the language of the world. That means we are not talking about, or for example, phonetics is not talking about English. Generally, it is talking about speech sound. Whatsoever the speech sounds are, wherever the speech sounds are, in whatever the language speech sounds are, maybe English, maybe Urdu, German, French, Russian, whatever the language is. But primarily, whatever the language is, we are focused on the production and perception of those sounds. Yes, the production and perception, or the reception. How do we produce the sounds, or how one speaker of one language, maybe Russian, he or she produces the sound, and how the other one perceives them. And that's why the last line of this slide says, it is the study of the characteristics of human sounds, especially those used in speech. This is the focus. This is the focus of this slide. What is phonetics now? The study of the characteristics of human sounds, especially those used in speech. Before this, we were saying speech sound, speech sound. Now, absolute clarity is there that human sounds used in speech. Human sounds used in speech. So whatever the language could be. But since we have to understand, we are learning about English, we are learning English, okay? So that's why we are referring to English language time and again. Okay? Does it make sense now? That's great. Wonderful. Now let's talk about some of the other disciplines which I had a talk on, in fact, in the beginning of this session, and of course before this session, in session number 1. For example, when touching upon physiology and physics, phonetics can be called a pure science that studies speech processes, including the anatomy, neurology, and pathology of speech, as well as the articulation, description, classification, production, and perception of speech sounds. We cannot separate whatever we are reading now. The ending part is that we are primarily concerned with the articulation, description, classification, production, and perception of speech sounds. That means in the coming days, on the coming sessions, we have to focus on these areas, on these 5 areas, and we have to understand the anatomy, neurology, and pathology of speech. We shall come to know that while we talk about the articulation, we have to refer to the words which I am mentioning. Or the other words, we have to describe the speech sounds. We have to classify them according to their production and perception. According to their production and perception. And then one more thing can be added to it, that all sounds, whether musical notes, animal noises, or human speech, are simply patterns of energy that move through air. Do you remember I uttered this line, this concept, but in a different way and with different words, that what is the medium? Sound waves. The medium they have is air. It is the energy released through our mouth. Absolutely right. Sometimes through nose, sometimes through mouth. I don't want to talk about on this that what are the sounds which are used or which are produced through nostrils or nasal cavity, and what are the rest. We shall definitely talk about them in detail in the coming session. Okay? But remember, human beings as well as other animals are equipped with certain physical characteristics that make possible the activities of breathing, biting, chewing, and swallowing. Essentially, some parts of the anatomy that participate in these functions also serve as a sound producing mechanism called the vocal tract. Vocal tract. While presenting or elaborating the speech organ diagram, I had a talk on this, the vocal tract, starting from our lungs, ending where? Lips or nostrils. That means it is called sound producing mechanism. All the time we are breathing, biting, chewing, swallowing. Anatomy is involved, yes or no? Yes, it is. But remember, my dear very honorable students, that it is the sound producing mechanism, and it is called vocal tract. Vocal tract. Hence, after having discussed each and every aspect, we are in the position to say that phonetics, what is phonetics? The study of the production and perception of speech sounds, including individual and group variations and their use in speech. That is the outcome we have of the discussion we have had today, that phonetics is the study of the production and perception of speech sounds, including individual and group variations and their use in speech. Maybe the sound is individual or they are group variations, but remember how they are used in speech. That is the sole motive of phonetics, to make us understand the concept of the production of speech sounds. Okay? While talking about the topics of today's session, I mentioned the branches of phonetics. Yes, today is not the session where we have to discuss all these branches in detail. But remember, it is appropriate that you should be knowing what are the names of those branches. We have been discussing the areas of phonetics, and we tried to understand what in fact phonetics is. But remember, when we talk about the sound itself, it is acoustic. When we talk about the production of the same sound, it is articulatory. And when we talk about the perception, reception, or we perceive the sound, that is auditory. But there is the fourth area at the same time, as the name itself tells you. I have given it a different color because I want to focus myself on the first three, so that you may be able to understand when we start talking about these branches in the next session, of course, session number 3. Before that, it is appropriate that you should be knowing, okay, there is phonetics. It is one of the branches of linguistics. And within phonetics, we've got 3 major branches. acoustic, articulatory, auditory, and of course then the fourth one is the functional. I hope you should remember the names. These names are very important for you to understand. If somebody puts you a question about the branches of phonetics, you can say, all right, these are the names. But we shall be having the detailed analysis of each and every branch of phonetics in the coming session. Hence, in a nutshell, my dear honorable students, I think we can say, or we are in the position to say, that phonetics is the systematic study of speech and the sounds of language. Phonetics is the systematic study of speech and the sounds of language. I am not using the word a. I am not saying the sounds of a language. No, rather I am saying phonetics is the systematic study of speech and the sounds of language. Traditionally, phoneticians rely on careful listening and observation in order to describe speech sound. Now, the last part of this statement, the phoneticians rely carefully on listening and on their observation. To do what? To describe speech sounds. That means that the most important area of phonetics shall be, so far as our discussion is concerned, that we should be able to describe speech sound. And this is what phonetics tells, that how we have to describe speech sound, because we know, yes, exactly, there is a system, and without following the system it is not possible to study speech and the sounds of a language, whatever the language it is. Okay, but before I end this session, it's very important that when you come for the next session, you have to give some sort of attention on this slide. I mentioned these names: articulatory phonetics, acoustic phonetics, and perceptual phonetics. Reception, okay, auditory. You can see at the bottom they are explained but not explained. Some words are used. When you come for the next session, it's my humble request that you must try to read about them. It's very important that all of you have got some sort of understanding, so that when I'll be talking, inshallah, during the third session, all of you should be able to understand whatever, for example, the new term you come across. So there may not be any sort of confusion. In fact, this is my sole purpose to present before you this slide. So please, you can have a focus, and afterwards, after this session, you can just see it all right closely and think about this slide, and afterwards start studying or reading about them. All right. Well, this is the end of session number 2, my dear students. But before we leave, as I told you earlier, that we have to go for some sort of self-assessment. Whatever we talk during one session, it is important that we must recall first of all what we've done. Yes, exactly, when you are listening to me, you have got the opportunity to stop. You've got the opportunity to do some sort of activity, or if not, for example, afterwards, whatever you have seen, whatever you have read, whatever you have listened, it is important to recall every item, because it's very important. That's why before we leave, I want you to do something, and that is recall what you have learned about the study of phonetics and reflect on it. I need your reflection. You have to give your reflection, because it's very important. You can consult some sporting material, some other books. There is no harm in it. And as I told you, that you can read as much material, whatever you want, or according to your capacity. And the second thing is that you have to tell me what are the different branches of phonetics. what are the different branches of phonetics, and you can simply define them. You can simply define them, nothing else I need from you. So for this session, thank you very much. Goodbye and good luck. Stay blessed.